A very good afternoon. Welcome to Brothers in Cooperation, a program that shows you works by Italians in Uganda, development work, but also other people who are not Italians, Ugandans, anybody who is working with the Italian cooperation or with the support of Italians for development. I am Saren Sigaye, and today I have very interesting guests, not health. Today we are going to talk about culture, something that is also passionate to me, but also, anyway, it is great to be healthy. It's also passionate to me. I have people who are culture practitioners, but in different sectors. I have Dr. Sylvia Nanyonga-Tamusuza. She's an associate professor of music, yes, Makerere University, and they call her ethnomusicologist, or yes, I'm pronouncing it badly.
Ethnomusicologist.
Okay, what does an ethnomusicologist do?
An ethnomusicologist is very concerned about culture and people and music, how music defines people and how people create music.
Does music define you? That and more when you stay tuned to this program. I also have Anna Baral.
Yeah,
I pronounced it well?
Yep,
I've been rehearsing the whole afternoon. Thank God. I'm good at rehearsing. Welcome.
Thank you.
She is a PhD student.
Yeah.
I can say you're an anthropologist already, or?
I'm a PhD student in anthropology, yeah.
Okay,
I will be an anthropologist one day.
You will be one day? That sounds far-fetched.
After my PhD, probably.
When is that?
3 years' time.
What does an anthropologist do?
There's a question for the whole afternoon. We deal with culture as well, so anthropology is the discourse about the human condition, so we really, you will see, we approach many different topics.
She's not one to tickle and get her to spill everything, so just stay tuned and you'll hear more. I would also like to introduce you to Professor Ndoleriire. If I pronounce it well?
Ndoleriire.
Ndoleriire. And I claim I come from that side. And yet I can't pronounce it very well.
Don't worry, it's very long. It's a very long name.
It's a sentence. Yes. I hope you don't mind.
It's a very long sentence.
He's a linguist. So tell me, who is a linguist? What does a linguist do?
A linguist studies the science of language.
Oh.
Not just to learn a language, but to know what a language is composed of. There are rules which govern every language at the level of words, at the level of sounds, how sounds combine to make words, how words combine to make sentences, how sentences combine to make speeches, and so on.
Interesting.
Yes.
I wouldn't have thought about that in detail like that. So there's a lot of science involved in the art of language.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so you had better stay tuned and you'll hear more. In 1979, something interesting happened. A gentleman called Francesco Renotti came to Uganda, and because of that, we have these three people here combined under one project, all cultural practitioners in different sectors. Tell me about that mission.
Yeah, I first have to correct you on one small point.
Okay.
The professor is called Francesco Renotti. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
He's a very known Italian anthropologist. And actually, the mission didn't start from Uganda, right in 1979, but it started from. It was called then the Italian Mission in Zaire because that was where it was based. Actually, the mission has moved in time. It's shifted in space. First, it was centered on the Banande culture. A second step was moving to Burundi. Then because of political upheavals in the region, it was not possible anymore to do research in Burundi, so they again shifted. The research of the mission comprised both Cameroon and northern Tanzania. Actually, it's only in 2004 that the mission, under the direction of Professor Cecilia Pennacini, who is right now the director of the mission, centered and concentrated on the Great Lakes region. So we are now studying in Uganda, but also in Rwanda, and also on the border between Congo and Uganda. So it has actually a long history, and it is moved in space. Of course, this long history is a consequence, and it is a very big group. It comprises many members, and I'm sorry that I'm the only one here from the Italian, representing the Italian part. I have many colleagues which are now in Italy and couldn't be here with us this afternoon. maybe we can say how we are doing cooperation with other missions.
Well, I'm interested in knowing how you're doing the cooperation, but I also want to know the interest in Equatorial Africa. Why Equatorial Africa? Because that's what seems to be the name, Italian Ethnological Mission in Equatorial Africa.
Yeah. MA and PhD involved in the mission, and it was also a consequence of the history of the region. We pushed the members to move up to Uganda, where it is now. We have 2 missions in the University of Turin, and so we are concentrating on this area.
On the area of Uganda, Rwanda, and
exactly,
Burundi?
and the Great Lakes, yeah.
So no longer Cameroon?
No, it's not anymore involved in our mission now.
Okay. I would like to come back to you, but I'm also interested in knowing how music falls into the picture, because how does, for instance, Dr. Nanyonga-Tamusuza come into the picture into this?
Yeah, of course, we are talking about culture. And when we talk about culture, music, language, and all these other things are part of it, even anthropology. So when she's been talking about Professor Cecilia Pennacini, there's also another one called Serena Facci, who is an ethnomusicologist from Italy. When the collaboration grew, there was need to have people from within Uganda that have areas to do with culture. And so I come in as an ethnomusicologist, as somebody interested in researching and writing about music. And my counterpart in that aspect is Professor Serena Facci, who is also a member of the mission.
Okay. I would like to, before I go to Professor Ndoleriire, I would like to come back to you. I'm sorry. You've told me about the cooperation, and there is a metaphor you were telling me about much earlier. Can you please try to link it?
Yeah, I was trying to explain what we do, because actually it's difficult. I know that you have had other guests who are working for NGOs especially, and so of course their kind of cooperation is something whose results you can see as something concrete, by building hospitals, building schools, building bridges, and launching them, inaugurating them. Of course, for us, cooperation is of a different kind, but I also like to think that we are building bridges which stretches across countries, and of course also across continents in our case. And these kind of bridges are, it's a very well-structured institutional framework which allows the scholars and the student to travel across space, to share knowledge, to share skills. So though we don't use brick and cement, we are also building, something and sharing something on the 2 sides of the mission. So this is actually our idea of cooperation, which is based on moving and coming back and forth in Uganda in this specific case, because it's very rare that an anthropologist or a social scientist goes just once in the field. We like to come back. So there's a continuous feedback between us and the people our local partners, and the mission gives us the framework which allows us to move in this sense.
Has this been your first time, or you're coming back?
No, I came here for the first time in 2004.
Okay.
In 2006, 2008, 2009, 10, 11.
Doing, were you still a PhD student at that time? Or
No, in 2004 it was my BA, and then I did my master's and PhD.
So Uganda seems to have been your specialty?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the appeal? What drew you to Uganda?
The appeal, you mean why I was so interested?
Because you came for the BA, the PhD.
Well, at the beginning it was just, I can say, even by chance, and then the interest just grew, and Uganda offers a really interesting environment for any kind of anthropological research, because it's rich in cultures, in music, in languages, and so of course it's an idea field.
I'm proud to hear that. I would like to get more details later. I'll go back to Professor Ndoleriire. Please excuse me, I do have a cold. It's the season. I would like for you to explain to me about this kind of cooperation and how it works with, for instance, are you with them as an individual or as an institution? How does it work?
I think I'm with them, first of all, as an administrator, because the mission, when it started, at least when we first signed an agreement between the University of Torino and Makerere University, which was in 2004, and then there was a renewal of the agreement in 2007, and we are going to renew it again next year, 2012.
You already know how?
Yes, we have already drafted. We have already drafted.
Interesting.
Our Vice Chancellor will sign, and the Rector of the University of Torino will sign. But when it was signed through the Institute of Languages. By that time, Professor Muranga was the director. Then I replaced him as director. When he left, he's now in Kabale. And right now, I am the principal of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, where again, this cooperation will be based. So from the administrative point of view, I'm involved. And then apart from that, I also had the opportunity, since the cooperation and the activities are in my field of interest, languages and culture, I had the opportunity to participate in the centenary celebrations of the ascension of the Rwenzori Mountains, because the Rwenzori Mountains were climbed by the Europeans in 1906.
In 1906?
And these Europeans were essentially Italian. There was the Duke of Abruzzi who came, and they went up. And even when you hear of those peaks like Stanley, Margarita, I think those are Italians, by the way. Me, I thought they were talking about English Stanleys and so, but they were
So
Italian.
Stanley is actually not English?
No.
Is that so?
Stanley is, but Margarita, the name of the peak,
No,
Margarita is...
Yeah.
Stanley is English.
Yeah.
The explorer, but Margarita
Is Italian.
Margarita is Italian.
So when was it named Margarita? In 1906?
I think after they had climbed them, then they named them. But what is interesting is they came from Mombasa. They came taking photographs throughout all this area, and they reached the Rwenzoris in 1906. They are wonderful photographs. I think we'll talk about them in this book. They are great photographs here. You see, for instance...
Were they some of the photos taken in 1906?
1906. You see the Baganda here with their
archiving.
nice houses,
Yeah.
banana plantations in here. You see Namirembe Cathedral with beautiful reeds on the ceiling and so on and so forth. Then you see the road from Entebbe to Fort Portal, which is there.
That so?
And you see the Batoro women already very elegant. Even at that time, it's very, very interesting.
Oh, and the
so on
Baganda
so
women were not elegant?
Oh, extremely elegant. But with beautiful banana plantations.
Good.
And, so anyway, so there was the celebration in 2006 of 100 years since the climbing of the Rwenzori Mountains by the Italians.
Where was the celebration?
Both here, we had a conference in the museum, the museum. Then there was another conference at the University of Torino.
Oh, really?
I had the opportunity to go there, because they presented a paper. I took the opportunity to go with my wife, who likes traveling.
Wow.
And it was a wonderful occasion.
Really?
Took the opportunity to do other things. I will talk about them later. I remember, I hope I'm not digressing, but we were invited to a lunch up in the mountains in the Alps. From Torino, we went up.
Italy, yeah?
In Italy. And the lunch began at 2 p.m. and lasted until 7 p.m.
No way.
And we continued eating and drinking and following some small...
Is that an Italian culture?
I don't know, but that's what I saw.
You take
Maybe
leisure at
for
lunch?
No.
When you're
Maybe
marking
for this-
100 years, maybe?
Maybe.
I don't know what happened, but we continued eating from 2 o'clock until 7 o'clock. And there were small glasses of alcohol which we were swallowing, and wine and so on. It was wonderful. But anyway, so that is the cooperation. We have students who have benefited from this cooperation.
How?
We have staff who have benefited. Students have done their masters, anthropology.
So who qualifies to go for the masters, and what's the arrangement?
It is difficult to say who qualifies, because for the moment the places are limited. So for the moment it was students who are already doing social anthropology, who are interested in anthropology, and there are not many. We also have the Professor Hamalwa, already a professor of anthropology, who also benefited. He went, as well as Dr. Tamusuza, an ethnomusicologist. She will talk more about her experiences there.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of, and then of course research, many Italians, as she would tell you, many scholars have come to do research on our areas, on the languages, and especially on the cultures, especially as far as Uganda is concerned, the cultures of the Rwenzori people, especially with the Bakonzo, and then going across the Banande. You may know that the Banande and the Bakonzo are more or less the same people. In fact, there are more Bakonzo, if I may say, in the Democratic Republic of Congo than in Uganda. So our eyes have been opened to the kind of, the language, the cultures, and so on. We discovered, for instance, that there was a Bible, a book written in Lukonzo, somewhere in the 15th century.
No way.
Lukonzo, and it's
in the 15th century?
Yes, and it is in the Vatican. We learned through this mission that it is in the Vatican and things like that. Very interesting.
In the 15th century?
Yes, by a Portuguese missionary.
Did we have contact with actually the
That's
West,
what it means. That
as in West?
Yes, that means that they came through maybe Angola and so on.
Has there been a study done? Because then our contact with the West seems to be associated with the English, much later.
That's what one would have thought. But then you discover Lukonzo book of the 15th century.
Because has there
15th or 16th, I'm not sure there. But
has there been any further studies or interrogation of?
I think we shall have to go to the Vatican, get hold of that book, and get more into it.
So what happened after you saw it? You left it. There hasn't been further pursuance to that effect.
No, not to my knowledge. But those are some of the things we have to do. That's the young people have to be involved in.
Because that brings me to what I wanted to ask. Because there's been a lot of studies. This book was, for instance, done by the Italians.
Yes.
What's Uganda's input in terms of content here?
Not this one. This is purely Italian. The Ugandan input, you'll find it in this one where I also have my article. You'll find it in this, and these are the books here. You find Ugandan contributions.
Okay.
Here, this was 1906. We didn't have many cameras at that time in Uganda.
I can imagine.
We didn't have many cameras.
So where did all this archive come from? We don't have copies of this. As like, say, the Uganda Museum?
I think if you went to the Uganda Museum, you'd have this. If you come to Makerere, there is a Rwenzori Research Center in my college. You'll find a lot of these photographs. Okay, and if you want the books themselves, I think you have to go to the Italian embassy because it was printed in Italy, and most of it is in Italian, but there's also some English.
I think, Anna, you will tell us where to get these books. But I'm also interested in knowing, there's been Italians coming to do studies here. There's been Ugandans going to do to study, but not to research, Or are there some research that we have done on the cultures of the Italians? Because then it becomes a give and take, or else now it looks like there's more people from Italy and other Western countries coming to study about our cultures, but we don't seem to be studying about their cultures. Or am I wrong?
You see, the problem we are having in Africa is that so little of ourselves is known, has been researched upon. Whether it's culture, whether it's language, whether it's plants, whether it's what. So when we go to those countries, we go most of the time to get the tools to be able to research on our own, because there's so little which has been done. Now, when you go to do research on the Italians and so on and so forth, they've done so much already, whether it's history, whether it's language, whether it's what. Unless you go for things like sociology, economics and so on. But even there is much more need. Because
the interesting things is that the things that they think are ordinary from our gaze and perspective are not. And they would be curious to get a sense of how we view their ways of life. Because then it becomes a cultural exchange as opposed to cultural patronage. I might be wrong. I'm really happy about that, but I'm just looking at it from a perspective of a culture practitioner and hopefully a scholar. Not yet, but shouldn't we also be feeding into them? And there are lessons for them to get from us when we study, for instance, the way they relate, the individualism and a lot of things that are in the West.
I do agree with you. There is a lot we can learn from them, but
we can teach.
We can teach, but then the snag is the religion which you practice, probably.
I'm not religious.
Or which your dad practiced.
Grandparents.
Or grandparents.
Grandparents, yes.
The history, most of the history which you learned in school, the language which we are speaking now, all that was already European. Okay? So there is already, we know already a lot about Europe.
That's true.
And America and so on. I learned so much American history, Canadian, whatever, geography. and so little was taught to us about ourselves. So that's why most of the time when you have an opportunity, you prefer discovering the virgin ground, which is your own, rather than going now to study more about the bridges of Italy, the Colosseum. You see, that's the problem. But I agree with you, it would be nice if we were more, if we could go deeper into our own, whatever we have, then we can have the luxury of now also analyzing more. That's the problem. That is, we have been fed so much.
And there are lessons anthropologists can draw for our people.
Oh my, a lot.
Even in the case of saying that this is what where we want to stand and stay, based on what we have and what we've studied.
Actually, I have done a research, though not in Italy, but in Norway, trying to understand how they conceptualize the so-called African music. And actually, this has been published by Fountain. There's a chapter in a book that we have just launched in the music department. So what I'm saying, I mean, there could be other possibilities, because for sure there's a lot of performance of so-called African music, for instance, in Italy and whatever. So probably that could be one of our next research, like I have done in Norway, to really have a kind of a comparison. And my experience was that these people are so used to being the ones studying us. In fact, when I was doing research in Norway, there was a big media attention, you know, because I was a so-called African studying them. In fact, they had
expert, because then you assume the role of an expert.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking, I mean, in terms of our next, as you know, the mission is just continuing. I think that would be one of the other areas we could study. How have these people appropriated our culture into their culture? And in that process, definitely you get to know more about them. For example, I had to understand, you know, when do they do parties? Because music is, so-called African music is performed during the parties and whatever. So I got to know about their way of behavior and all their understanding. And when I asked questions, some of them were like, oh, Sylvia, we've never heard of that.
Sylvia, I'm really interested in what you've said, but so am I interested in what Anna has said. I'm interested in what Professor Ndoleriire. I can't wait to come back when we go for a break. I want to know what you found out or your study found out, but I also want to hear from Anna and Professor Ndoleriire when we come back from the break. Don't go away. Welcome back from the break. Before the break, Dr. Tamusuza, Nanyonga-Tamusuza, was telling us about her study, and I'd like to get a little insight into what your findings were.
Yeah, probably that would be another talk, because it's quite a long one. I would like to talk about my benefit within the mission.
This mission? The
mission, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have been able to publish 2 articles. One I co-authored with Selena Faci, and then I've also been able to have students from Italy, and one of my students that I'm very proud of is Linda Chimaldi, who's been doing research among the Banyoro in Fort Potro, and has also been in Masindi on music and the culture of the Mpango music and all those the culture of the Banyoro. And she's been coming back and forth. And you know, we as teachers, we always learn a lot. And when you have a student that is outside of your own culture, it enables you also to understand a little bit more. So I can probably proudly say I'm an international supervisor, because I've supervised my own students from here and also students from outside. And then another probably very important thing I would like to say is that my relationship with Serena Faci and Cecilia Pennacini began in 2003. And of course, when I became part of the mission in 2004. But what I want to say is that I was introduced to the Renzori. Since till that time, my research had been in Uganda about music, Baksimba, gender, and all those kind of things. I'd never done research outside my own culture. And that was my first time to go to Kasese and climb those mountains and see the beautiful creation of God. And that was really wonderful for me. Of course, the article that we wrote together with Cecilia, with Serena Faci, is also in that book of the Renzori histories. You can see it there. And so that was really important for me, you know, because I have grown as a scholar. And of course, you know that in any university, you cannot become an associate professor, which I am, unless you have published. So it has given me that opportunity to do that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Also, although what you've just also told me draws me to something that I would really like to sort of like get my finger on.
Yeah.
The fact that these Italians came for research and you've been supervising them also sort of like introduced you to areas in your country that you may never have seen. Yeah?
Yes.
That also shows that maybe there is little attempt from us to get initiatives to go outside us, Uganda, but us. Is it economical? Is it infrastructural? What happens that actually for us to take some of these initiatives, even our own studies, it has to be somebody else who has to come?
Yeah, that is really, Sarah, that's a very unfortunate situation. But you know very well that when we come to funding research, it's usually the sciences. The arts people, it's very, very limited. In fact, I must say that I've had more funding from outside to do all the researches that I have done. I've published, I think I can talk about 17 publications. But most of the research I have gotten has been from outside.
Is it policy that arts are not funded and it's sciences?
I mean, it's not a policy per se, I mean, at least in the university. But you see, when you get any grants or anybody funding, because Makerere doesn't have its own funds, you know, but when we get anybody, whether it's the government, you see the science is always put up. So you find that, you know, for us to be able to do research from, you know, in the arts, you either have funding from outside, and that's how the Italian cooperation came in. Is
there any initiative that is being done by the scholars, for instance, in the universities, cultural practitioners, artists, to sort of like lobby for more support in this area? Because isn't art equally important and their benefits? Yeah, we have been lobbying and we'll continue lobbying. What, is there any signs of any response? Yeah, we are still waiting. I cannot say that we have any signs yet, but we are still waiting.
Where do you lobby? 2 weeks ago, we invited the cultural, the Commissioner for Culture from the Ministry of Culture, Gender and Family in Uganda, and she attended we are launching a book, and we are also having an archive on Ugandan music at Makerere University. And that was an opening for us to begin having a dialogue. In fact, I'm planning to have a meeting with her very soon. Interesting. Yeah. I would like to keep posted, because culture is sort of shelved, but culture is a way of life, and if that area is not supported, then we don't go ahead. I would like to invite the studio to play a video by Professor Pennacini. I hope I'm pronouncing it properly, and after that we'll come to Anna to give us more details. Can you please run the video?
Kugamba kisinzira omuzikulu wajja aliko ebizibu bye tulaga ebifo ebyo n'awaabamu ensonga ze n'asaba kati bajjajja bwe bamanyi kye bamukolera kisinziira buli muntu naye nga okusooka bajja ng'abasamizi kati empewo neeragira n'emuleeta.
The Muslims were the first people to come here around 1844. They came to do business, not to convert people. So they stayed around, they did business, they were looking for ivory, slaves, and a lot of other goods. And they were not interested in converting people to Islam because they were traders. 30 years later, in 1877, the Protestants came. And for them, they had an agenda. They wanted to convert people to Protestantism. At the same time, they wanted to build schools, to build hospitals. Then 2 years later, the Catholics came in 1879, and they had the same program. They wanted to build churches, convert people, build schools, hospitals, really to play a role in society. And also, in the meantime, the Muslims woke up. They realized that they had to do something if they were not going to be left behind. So they also did their best to get converts. The British, when they took over, they established their administration. They were at the top. The Indians, the middlemen, were there to do business because they came mostly after 1906, after the East African Railway had been built. Many of them wanted to stay on. Others were soldiers in the King's African Rifles. And so the British established the three layers of society, with them at the top, the Indians in the middle, and the Africans at the bottom.
When the commissioner in charge of the Uganda Protectorate realized that more and more people were becoming Christianized and Muslim, and so most of their artifacts of worship were being abandoned. So they encouraged the nationals to bring those artifacts so that they are kept at the center. And so in 1902, people started collecting these artifacts, and by 1908, they had opened a museum at Fort Rugard.
Interesting. For me, religion is a very interesting topic. He did say it, but he also seemed to sort of like indicate the role of religion in actually colonialism, because it looks as if the religion took the mind, but it also looks like we seem to have retained a bit of a sense of our religion, traditional religion, and beliefs. And I don't know what you think of the role of religion in as far as politics, leadership, spirituality is concerned, and how your study informs us, actually, even the video that we just watched.
Okay. Before replying to your answer to your question, I would just make a remark about the fundings of the mission, because I forgot to tell it at the beginning, since Sylvia was talking about the fundings. Of course, the mission is co-funded by the University of Turin and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Italy, so of course, to which we are thankful for the support for our research. This is important to remind.
Yeah, I would later like to ask you what's in it for the government, but I don't want to lose track of this religion and and the video that we just watched.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me about that video.
Yeah, the video is Kampala Babel. That's, you can show like this. A film by Cecilia Pennacini, as you said. The music, the original music, is by Nanyonga-Tamusuza, which is who is a renowned Ugandan musician and also Professor Nanyonga's husband, is right to say. You saw there was this wonderful commentary by Moses Isagawa, who was contextualizing in a historical way the coexistence of several religions nowadays in Uganda. And as you said, it's true, there are several religions who came from outside, but there is still, luckily enough, the so-called traditional religion. Then we could talk about the definition of traditional for many hours, but let me stop here. Indeed, the concept of conversion in Africa, I would say in general, and in Uganda maybe more particularly, is a very ambiguous term, because conversion is, yeah, it happened, but it didn't delete what was before. So, of course, we have many members of the mission who do research about religion. One, of course, is the director, Professor Pennacini. Let me also mention some other research, maybe, who are very interesting. The one by Dr. Alessandro Guzman on the Pentecostalism. especially in Kampala. Then we have Valeria Tardivo doing research about the cult of Nyabingi in the West. We have Francesca Rosa doing research about the funeral rites. So of course religion
is there a culture of Nyabingi in the West? I would have thought it's a Rwandese culture.
No, it's there.
Where they worship Nyabingi? In which part of the West? In Chigezi?
Yeah, in Chigezi.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so we have like Valeria is writing up a master dissertation right now on the issue. So yeah, religion of course is a great part of what we call culture, and I will not go into details about the relationship between religion and politics because I don't want to touch sensitive issues.
Is that sensitive? Should I say anthropologists want to write and don't want to talk about things, or are you playing safe here?
I'm playing safe now. Now, of course,
are your studies mainly limited to religion? What are some of the studies you're conducting?
Well, in my case, I'm more about. They are more about anthropology of politics and power.
And you don't want to talk about politics?
Yeah, of course. I can talk about power, which is less sensitive. Yeah, anthropology of politics is about power, actually, how power is conceptualized, transmitted, negotiated, contested. And I think Uganda became a very interesting field from this perspective after 1993, after the restoration of traditional kingdoms, because a lot of traditional leaderships who had been banned and almost forgotten during 30 years' time were just revived. And so it's very interesting to see the relation with the central state, how they fit in a post-colonial state, which is a republic and it's not a monarchy as in the colonial time anymore. Talking about power and politics, I'm not the only one doing this kind of research. We have another colleague who is Dr. Sara Gartoncini, who is the author of the documentary that we were screening some minutes ago on the Rwenzori. She's done research about traditional chiefs negotiating the borders of their land on the mountains. So it's another. Then, of course, for example, also Professor Remotti deals with power and politics in his research, especially pre-colonial politics. One of his several research was about the pre-colonial capitals of the kingdom. And you know that, for example, Buganda had Great Lakes kingdoms had shifting capitals that were not fixed in territory. So it's very interesting to see, talking about power, how power shifts on the territory and gets rooted here and there and show off to the people in different places. So
this takes me to my earlier questions. I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
No.
Because I was interested to know, when your government funds projects where you're researching about people's cultures, the power, the religions, what do they benefit in return? What do they expect to achieve?
It's knowledge, you know. We are accumulating knowledge and we are knowing something which is outside Italy, which is very important nowadays.
Okay, and when you as researchers, like when you research about the Buganda, the study that you're doing, what is it, scholarly, or is there anything that you think will come out of it for other people, scholars, or even people in power, or is there any, what do you think will be the contribution of these particular studies, apart from, say, the Ugandans, because they might find it useful? What's the relevance?
Yeah, this is a tricky question which can be applied to any humanity. You know, study humanity is the practical thing. We're not building with bricks and cement, as I told you. I think that anthropological research is fundamental nowadays, and especially the practice of fieldwork, of being there, as we say. It's more a perspective that you have, a look that you have to the reality around you, a way of always interrogating what is around you, interrogating and trying to understand the difference, the meanings which are behind the actions of people, never taking anything for granted. I think that this is the big lesson of anthropology, and it is the fruit which anthropological and not only but social sciences studies are bearing as a result. And I think it's a very important result.
Professor Ndoleriire, do you think our governments take a lot of also interest in those areas, and do they invest in the researches and studies?
Our government in many African countries have been very worried about sciences, because normally we don't have enough money to buy equipment for laboratories. Many of our science teachers are not properly trained. So the governments, and I think rightly so, want to promote sciences. But then they sometimes go overboard and start thinking that the humanities, the cultures are not important. And that becomes very dangerous and sad. Because no people who do not know themselves can move forward, can develop, can go out to discover. You have to know yourself first.
Yes.
And that has been our problem. We hardly know our languages. We don't know our religions. We don't know our history. We ridicule what is basic for us. And that's probably one of the reasons why you cannot develop scientifically and technologically, because we don't have pride in ourselves. We don't know ourselves. So when some of our leaders go out even to start ridiculing things like history, which tells you who you are, our traditional religions, our languages, because it's difficult to think and invent in a foreign language. And it's probably one of the reasons why we don't write enough, why we do not read even newspapers, why we don't read, because we have not mastered the foreign languages properly, and we don't know our own language.
Exactly.
So we are confused. And that's where, for us, we continue talking, but unfortunately you cannot talk enough. You even talk to an educated people, he looks at you, he just smiles and says, what is this fellow talking about? And that's the big problem we are having in Africa. We don't know ourselves, we do not want to be proud of ourselves, we are always looking out there for what there is. So I am glad that when these people come, as they do research, they try to remind us, by the way, why don't you look behind your house there? There is something interesting. And then we also go into it. And as Dr. Tamusuza was saying, well, you take the advantage when they give you a bit of money to do your own work.
Yeah.
Until the time, hopefully, when our own leaders will wake up to realize that we have to look for ourselves first before we can even invent and innovate scientifically and technologically.
Because that also draws me to the issue of I don't know if it's the lack of government support. I don't know if it is an identity crisis where maybe a person is not going to think Ugandan and maybe first think of, say, being a Mogishu. So maybe they don't see the relevance of conducting those studies and building an identity. But what I would like to sort of like try to link together is that when there is a failure to support and build what is ours and sort of like identify who we are and where we want to go, we seem to lose ourselves, especially it seems that it is the educated people to an extent. What are we going to do to hit that balance? Because when you go to Katwe, when you see traditional herbalists, those are people who seem to not have lost a sense of direction and who they are, and yet they also seem to lack in this modernity, modern education and how it would help them. How do you, as researchers, how do you as institutions make a link to these? And some of your studies, who accesses them after you've gotten them, apart from the scholars? How do people get access to them? I know there are like 3 questions, but I would like both of you to answer them.
Yeah.
But what I could say is that, I may be exaggerating, but I think we, the so-called educated, are the most dangerous for the society. Because we are the ones looking out there. We are the ones trying to say that whatever is out there is better than what we have. We are the ones dreaming to go for Nkuba Cheyo.
Yeah.
You have a degree, but instead of trying to get some small business, go back to a farm, you are eager to go to Britain, even if you have to go under the ship and be arrested and be tortured, but you are ready to run and go. And we are the ones who take that mentality to the rest of the people. We are the ones telling the masses that there is nothing good here. If you rush out to even to Iraq and so on, things will be better there. And you will notice that many of the people who go out keep quiet because they can hardly make ends meet there. And they don't want to acknowledge that. And everybody continues dreaming. You finish your first degree, you finish your second degree, you want to go out there. And we are telling the rest of society that that's what is best for us.
Yeah, I think I can probably speak more in the line of music and in the Department of Performing Arts and Film Makerere. What we are trying to do, because you are asking about how are we linking with the community, we are actually having a big outreach through the Ethnomusicology in Uganda projects, which I do coordinate, of trying to relate with the community outside. For example, in our last symposium, which was 2 weeks ago, we actually invited practitioners to come and share with us in the academic forum so that we can talk about things that are relating with us. Certainly, I do agree that there's been a huge gap between the so-called educated and the people we are talking about, the Katwe people and the practitioners. But we've come to realize that there is no way we can stand if we want to fight, especially now when we talk about the arts. We really need to work with the people outside. I have collaborated with Sylvia Chagulanyi. I have collaborated with Joe Tabla. I've also had links with Joe Juanita.
Yeah, well, I want to commend that, but I also want to point out that they're educated.
No, what I'm saying, no, I'm talking about, you know, we have probably the word education is very misleading because I think all of us, in a way, we are really educated. But what I would probably say, the academic and the practitioners. Thank you for the correction. Yeah, because the kind of people I'm talking about are actually educated people. I've invited them to come in my classes. They've given classes. Juanita Kawalia has also given classes in my lectures. We are trying to bridge, but as we have been saying, we need support. Because, for example, you want to invite Sylvia Chagulanyi, you know, and just don't even have fuel to put in his car, you know, and because you belong to the arts. When the budgets are drawn and when the priorities are set, there isn't so much of collaborative projects, even locally, that you can draw into to have these people link with us. As Professor has said, we really need the government. We need people who are in the policy, in the education, in the promotion of culture, in the promotion of the well-being of us, meaning the Ugandans, to really see the need to promote the arts. Because as he has said, if you can't speak your language, there's no way.
I hit to run now. I have you. I do have you. It's really interesting, and it's always so touching to see people, academics at the universities, some practitioners who are really, really committed to this cause, who want to take us forward, and they are frustrated, and there's no support. And I hope that there are some people in the ministry, legislators who are watching that, and it's high time we forge a way forward. I don't know how. That is the more reason I'd like to thank the Italian government and the Italian corporation for making this possible. And when we come back, we'll hear more about the kind of support that they are giving us. We'll go for a break. We'll also hear, I'm interested when we come back, I'm also interested to know about the interactions you do with the community briefly, because I know that Makerere University, for instance, works with communities, even people who are not educated. How can other departments borrow from that experience? That and more when we come back. Welcome back. Like I was saying before we went for the break, I was talking about sort of like commending the Italian government, because as you just heard, I'm not actually, excuse me, I'm not accusing our government. I'm just saying we need more support. But also, you actually need to give credit where it is due. And while we do not have support from our government and the arts has been ignored, there are other people who are helping us. They're making possible the studies, the research, the collaborations, and the exchange programs. So tell me about these, like the agreements you have with us and how this is made possible.
Yeah, as we have already mentioned, the main agreement now in Uganda is the one with the Makerere universities. We also have other agreements, for example, with the University of Butembo. We have an agreement with a Center of Studies on Gender in Kigali, in Rwanda, where my colleague Ilaria Buscaglia is carrying out her PhD research. So we work through agreements with the Institute of Research or universities. Here we have an also agreement, which is with the Uganda Museum, because of course cultural heritage is another important part of our research. We have also participated to a very huge program in the last 3 years, which was called Chorus. It dealt with the sacred sites in East Africa. It comprised Uganda, Madagascar. There were French, Italian, Ugandan, and Malgache and Kenyan scholars joining the project. And we were doing research on a selection of sacred sites in East Africa, the negotiations, the symbols, the meanings attached to these sacred sites. And we were lucky to have also representatives of the Uganda Museum. For example, Rose Mwanjankale, who is the curator. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here this afternoon because she's not in Kampala. But of course, so we also work with the museum on the cultural heritage side, and we can we use an agreement which is very similar to the one which we have with Makerere. So it's an agreement which also allows students from here or members of the museum from here to go in Italy and do research programs.
Oh, thank you. Actually, for me, I want to add my voice. This is not the forum, but I cannot miss the opportunity to talk about how saddened I am, as I am sure the two professors here are, about the proposed demolishing of the Uganda Museum.
Oh.
I want to thank you for the support that you're giving to the Uganda Museum, but a trade center, the East African Trade Center, I don't know if we've run out of land, is proposed to go to the Uganda Museum. Can you briefly tell us the role of a museum and why we need a museum?
A museum keeps, I mean, it keeps your history, it keeps your tradition, it keeps your heritage. So as we saw in some of those images there, you see some of the artifacts, the fetishes, which were collected in 1907, 1908, and so on, and people have been collecting. They are all there. So, although on the other hand, I must also say that I am not too emotional about the breaking down of that museum as it is. First of all, it is very small by international standards. So if we are told they're going to put a big structure, I don't know how many stories.
60?
60, which I
No.
personally,
That's
what
what
I
they are
had.
proposing,
That's what
60?
they had. So if they're going to put 60
There's
stories,
a model.
if they have me, I like tall buildings, by the way. So if they're going to put a 60-story building,
Wow.
and if they are going to give the museum, let's say, 4 stories, that would be much bigger than the small corners we have. So personally, I'm not too emotional to tell you about the structure, as long as what there is preserved and probably even improved upon. So I am not too. That's my
you
own
mean
personal
that
opinion.
if what we have stays and they develop a 60-story elsewhere?
No, there. And then
Isn't the museum part of the history that we should retain?
I don't think so. I see nothing special about the buildings there. They are just ordinary Western style buildings. So I don't see what is so special. If there was some African architecture in the building itself, something to remind us, like the Kasubi tombs.
Dr. Ndoleriire, I'm going to come back to you on that point, but
Yes.
we do have Sarah from the Uganda Museum, who is a beneficiary of this project, and she was able to go to Italy and study. Sarah, do I still have you?
Yes, you have me, but the voice is too low from that side.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
It's great to have you, Sarah. How are you?
I'm okay.
Tell me about Italy and this exchange program.
What do you want me to start with, Italy or the exchange program?
Well, the exchange program took you to Italy. So tell me how you work with them and what it is you saw in Italy and what you did in Italy when you went to Italy.
Okay, so I had an exchange program starting from March to June. The first month was here. I was doing anthropology in development processes. And here we're looking at how you can use anthropology in the development of the project, especially for us to work with projects who work with cultural heritage, such things. But I had the first month in Uganda online. It was basically theory. And then when I went to Rome, for the last 3 months, we were able to have a practical way of doing things interacting with other international organizations, questioning things such as development, economics, how do you deal with cultures when you're having a project in the villages or even in town, but how do you deal with people's cultures, how do you deal with development, and are you really doing development? So the program was an eye-opener, because sometimes you have projects, but the objective of the project doesn't come out well, or you are just having projects because you want to work. But after having this kind of exchange program, looking at the perspective of anthropology, you find that when we came back, at least for my case, when I came back, it was I was looking at things in a different way. At least I tried to make things right, and I had interacted with people like those who work in IFAD and other international organizations like FIDA. They give us their experience, why they failed in projects and why it was a success. So after having some case studies, why projects failed, why projects were success, it is easy for someone to come and put the two things together and then come up with something else. I think that's the best kind of exchange program. And maybe about Italy.
Quickly, please.
Yes, the fact that I was staying in Rome, I spent the 3 months in Rome, though I visited other places. For my case, I am a cultural heritage practitioner, so I was looking at the way Rome, or they call it Roma, they were able to preserve, conserve the historical buildings, how they are using their history to make money. I was looking at the number of people who are visiting this place and how they are really having their heritage as a kind of resource for their people.
I'm afraid time is not our best ally. It has been interesting talking to you, talking about conservation. Shortly before the phone call, before you came in, we were talking about demolishing the Uganda Museum and conserving what we already had. And Dr. Ndoleriire here thought the Uganda Museum, which is the oldest, one of the oldest buildings in East Africa, that there was nothing special. But there is also a tendency now to keep all the buildings that are over 50 years, because it is sort of like a face. You go to Europe, you go to other parts, you go to Kigali, you go anywhere, and you know how those people were those years. So that is part of it. And museum is not only a storage, but I have to be aware that I'm talking to a scholar, and it is interesting to have different views. And for that matter, I had not talked to you, Dr. Nanyonga-Tamusuza. What do you think of the proposed demolishing of the Uganda Museum?
I think it's a very sensitive situation, and especially if, as he has said, probably the building as a building is not a unique thing. But my worry is that where are we going to put these artifacts during that whole process? My fear is that we might lose these things, and that is really one of the biggest worries. You know, and another thing is, you know, we have been still going back to the arts, you know. I'm sorry, I have not been convinced that actually this whole thing is done in the good spirit, and that we are actually going to have another museum where we are going to have those things housed. That's my real worry.
But also, post-independent Africa seemed to have lost a sense of what is development, because infrastructure and modernity seem to become what is the understanding of development. But Uganda has huge land, people are developing more cities, we don't have enough buildings, and we are destroying the little that we have, and this is going to take 10 years. So that is the argument that people who are anti or against the demolishing of the Uganda Museum have been floating. But that takes me away from the topic today, which is actually me having these three researchers in different parts of culture and culture institutions, linguists, anthropologists, and ethnomusicologists. I think I'll have to let the Uganda Museum pass and quickly come to, I'll start with Dr. Professor Ndoleriire. I'd like you to tell me, at least in as far as culture, the arts is concerned, and research, what you would like to be your parting word.
My parting word is that we Africans have a tendency to always wait for others to come and support us. We want to be helpless. We feel helpless if no one comes from there and tell you what to do. I just want to urge the young scholars and older scholars that please start. So when these sisters and brothers of ours come, let them find you doing something already. Don't always wait to be for some manna coming from another country. Start already. You can do something already.
Anna?
Yeah, I think I will have just two short remarks. The first one, I wanted to do it before. You are talking about brothers in cooperation, but as we have seen, we are really also sisters in cooperation.
Yes,
so, so it's important because we are very proud of being sisterhood also, and there's a sisterhood also going on. As a concluding remark, I'm glad that you gave us this opportunity to be here today, because culture is overlooked. You know, when you talk about cooperation, you talk really usually about other things. And it's finally we had an occasion, an arena where to explain what we are doing with culture, which is also very important as a cooperation tool.
Thank you. Dr.
Yeah,
Tamusuza.
I would like to end also by thanking all the support that we've gotten from outside, and also to challenge ourselves, as Professor has said, that we need, in Uganda we have a saying, omuntu bwanga gwofiiriddwa gwokwata gwokwata wawunya nyini mufu. Thank you so much. Yakwata wawunya. This is a challenge to all of us. I want to assure you, Professor, and everybody who is listening, we have trained many people who are willing to do research. Like this year, I graduated 5 MAs, but these people need funding to do the research. So if we are supported, I am very sure we are going to change the scholarship of the arts, music, language, and all our cultural heritage. Thank you.
Culture is a way of life. Culture is who you are. The arts, the sciences are important, but who will do any sciences if they don't even understand who they are? Yes. Government people, such as institutions, legislators, wake up. I'm sorry to wake you up, but you should be proud of yourself first. And if you want to unlock your mind to decolonize and say you're 50 years independent, you had better start demonstrating your independence with your mind by supporting who you are and deciding where you want to go. It's been a wonderful program, Brothers in Cooperation, a program brought to you by the Italian Corporation, initiatives geared towards developing Uganda, working with Ugandans and Italians. I'll join you next week. I want to thank the technical crew. I want to thank Lillian, my makeup artist, Nora, the people on camera, the people on sound, Malco, the Italian Corporation for making this possible. Do have a wonderful weekend. Stay tuned. There's more interesting program coming your way.